many people who were in my corner because, being the youngest person, whenever I was asked a question about my age or my experience, I'd always say, you know, listen to the people who currently have the job because I was the only person in that race that had endorsements from current members of Congress. And being able to say that, I think, really helped open up people's hearts and minds. So I'm very, appreciative of them. The speaker called to congratulate me as well, and she said it's going to be refreshing to have someone of my age in Congress, and hearing that from someone like her gives me a lot of hope for the future of the country as well.
Yeah, and finally, we know that politicians on the campaign trail make a lot of promises. Um, Many they don't keep. But
Yeah.
here's one we'd like for you to keep if you make. You will come back to the Black press. You will make sure that whoever you hire as your press person, your communications director, know that the Black press will be calling, and we'll get you to come back.
110%. I'd love to be back. Thank you for the interview. And I'll say on promises, something I made sure to do is we did not promise what would happen, but we promised what we would fight for, and we promised how we would fight for it. And I know it's a little weird to hear that, but I think part of the reason we have so much political apathy is because we for generations politicians have told us vote for me and this will happen. And
Right.
what we found is that's not how this system works. Right? I'm not running to be a mayor, governor, or president. I don't decide anything by myself, right? Besides what I do. And so I made sure that when I talk about healthcare, when I talk about gun violence, I'm always saying, listen, at the end of every speech, I would say, I'm one of many people. I
Yeah.
will fight for this. This is how hard I will fight for it. And this is how we will do this. The outcome will depend on many things. And I made sure to keep it that way. And I think a lot of times in politics, we might think, why would you tell people you can't promise an outcome? Because I can't. And that realism is what's going to help us get to a place where most people actually believe in democracy because they weren't lied about it their whole lives. And that's the problem. And so we need politicians and people stop lying out your mouth and tell the truth and talk about how you're piece of a bigger puzzle, and that you alone can't do it yourself, because what that does is in 2 years people will look at the record through the lens of the reality of the situation. And that's what I always thought growing up looking at politicians. And so I'm very careful. You'll never hear me promise an outcome as a member of Congress, but I will promise my fight, and I will promise what I'll do.
25-year-old Maxwell Frost is running for Congress on a platform of more gun laws, better health care, and an improved focus on environmental justice. And he might just be headed to Congress. In fact, he's almost a shoe-in now that he's won the Democratic primary. He is running for the Florida's 10th congressional district, which is dominated by a crowd of Democrats. He won more than 34% of the vote, and he's set to run against Republican Calvin Wimbush in the November election in a district that is, again, considered a Democratic stronghold. If he heads to Washington in January to take the seat vacated by Val Demings, he would be the first member of Generation Z to become a member of Congress. He would also be the only Afro Cuban in Congress. We're going to hear a lot more from Maxwell Frost this morning. But first, let's bring on the journalists who are joining us this morning. James Wright of the Washington Informer and Janice Armstrong of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Good morning, y'all.
Good
Good morning.
morning.
Well,
Wow, what a breath of fresh air.
well, 25 years old, right? Generation Z. That is a breath of fresh air. He has a lot of that to say. But before we get to that, let's just check in on some history making that happened again last night. Serena Williams, she brought out the crowds, the fans, the curious, and others. They made their way to the Flushing Corona area of Queens, New York, to see Serena Williams as the 23-time singles champ easily defeated 80th ranked Danka Kovinic in the first round of the U.S. Open at Arthur Ashe Stadium. It's a special occasion indeed, as Serena announced that the Open would be it. It will be the final event in the greatest tennis career ever. Fans will be treated to two matches on Wednesday when she faces off against number 2 ranked Annette Kontaveit in the singles round of 64, and when she gets together with her sister Venus for the open doubles play. So Serena rose to the challenge last night, 6-3, 6-3, 6-3. She well, 6-3, 6-3, right? She dominated, really. I mean, she got off to a slow start, Janice and James, but she immediately turned it around, and we might be in for that run of ages right now. The final dance for Serena, and she may be prepped to go all the way.
Fingers crossed, praying hard for her. You know, she really is the GOAT, and she deserves this.
I know you've been, Janice, you've been doing this a long time.
Hey.
Well, you're good at what you do. Let's say it that way. Okay. You're good at what you do. Great columnist out there in Philadelphia at the Inquirer. How much of Serena's career have you followed? Have you covered at all?
Well, the truth is, I followed it her whole career. And the last couple of years, even more so, because with the pandemic, there was not much else to do other than play tennis. And I've gone down the bunny rabbit hole. I'm playing practically every day. And the more I play, the more I realize, I think about what the Williams sisters accomplished. I mean, they totally changed the game. They totally changed the game. And they just really did. And my phone was going crazy last night with my friends and tennis buddies. We're all psyched. And I'm really hoping also that it might not be the end for her. You know what I mean? Sometimes people say it's the end and then they come back. So that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in sports, right? James, Serena, I know you've followed the Williams sisters. Last night's performance, where would you put it?
I thought it shows that she is going to go out gracefully and hopefully go out as a winner. But when she started playing tennis with her sister as a professional, Stacey, she was a winner anyway, because she came in and really integrated the sport. Okay, I know about Arthur Ashe. I know about Althea Gibson being really the first Black woman to really hit the stage big time in terms of tennis. But it is the Williams sisters, particularly Serena, but the Williams sisters, that really integrated tennis and made tennis a sport that Black people can really pay attention to. Also, one thing you might want to know, as the Williams sisters were beginning to get their start, Stacey and Janice, in tennis, a young man by the name of Tiger Woods was also getting his start in a game called golf. So they kind of came in all together, which shows this kind of confluence of people of color coming into these elite sports.
Yeah, of course, Tiger Woods was
and dominating. Not just coming in, dominating. And let's call it what it is: Black people coming in. People can call themselves whatever they want, but we know what's what, right?
That's right.
Well, it was so interesting, because when they started out, Venus was the one that everybody looked to, at least the so-called experts and the sports writers looked to and thought, wow, that is she's going to be the one. And for a very brief moment there, she was winning and she was the one, right? And then Serena just surpassed not just her sister, which her sister didn't mind, but everybody, not just her immediate competition, but anybody who's ever played the game. You got to give props, as David Youngblood writes in, the GOAT. You do. And you said it, Janice. She certainly is the GOAT. There's no argument. I mean, you can argue all you want, but you'll lose that argument, in many ways to Sunday, as they say. You're gonna lose that argument.
And you know what's nice is that she did it on her terms. She did it in a light blue tutu. She did it in a one-legged cat suit. She's unapologetically Black.
The cat suit brought men to like women's tennis, let me tell you. Right, James? Come on, James. You know it's true.
You got that right.
And remember, she started off with the beads in her hair. They've never backed away from their culture, who they are, and they never dialed it back to make other people more comfortable. I mean, she was tall, she was big, she was strong, and unapologetically so. Yeah. And beautiful and fierce and feminine all at the same time. She'd kick somebody's behind and then do a little twirl at the end on the court. A little dainty twirl.
James, you hear the pride of a Black woman right there?
Yes. Yes, and I'm so glad to hear that pride, because Janice is absolutely right. Because if you really think about it, before the Williams sisters came up, Stacey and Janice, You know, people were talking about Billie Jean King and Martina Navratilova and
Chris Everett.
Yeah, Chris Everett, and that's all they really talked about. And those women were the symbols of womanhood in the United States.
Hey, you mentioned Billie Jean King real quick before we move on. If you remember back in the early 70s, James, back, you know, you had already got your college degree back then. And
don't let him do it too, James.
do you remember, like, Billie Jean King had this match? I can't think of the guy's name.
I remember.
Bobby Riggs.
Bobby Riggs, yeah. And it was,
I was a baby, but I remember.
Right, and this whole men were so much superior to women in tennis or whatever. And you know, I don't know if Billie Jean King could have really beaten the world's #1 back then, but I will tell you this: that there's not a man in tennis that Serena would at least give them a strong showing or beat. Many of them she'll beat without question. Most of them she'll probably beat. True. This woman, Serena Williams, and again, I'm going to go back to my guy, David Youngblood. He says Serena is the Serena. He writes in, Serena is the Serena of sports. Anybody writes in, we lift y'all up. But David writes in he puts the punctuation mark on it because he's right. I mean, when you say tennis, if you say tennis, like you say golf, you can't help but to think of Tiger Woods. Right. When you think of tennis, you can't say anything else except Serena Williams. And there it is, the GOAT. No, you know, that's it. End of story. The GOAT. And Janice, you are 1000% right in your perspective. A great perspective you brought this morning on Serena Williams. Now we turn our attention to Maxwell Frost, who is he's on his way, y'all, to becoming the first generation Zer to serve in Congress. We spoke to him first before we bring in some of these clips, James and Janice. James, 25 years old. That's the earliest you can become a congressperson, number one.
Yes.
But this young man has outraised all of his opponents. He's galvanized in Florida of all that in the 10th district there. How big is that, James?
Well, you know, he will represent Orange County, not all of Orange County, just part of Orange County, which says a lot about him. His district is plurality white, but only by it's 34% white, 26% black, and the rest Latino, Hispanic. And let me just say this, with all due respect to people who come from prominent families, he did this on his own, and I can say that he did it on his own. He didn't come from a famous prominent family. He got involved in politics. He worked in order to get that nomination. Got a lot to say about him, but I'll just say that for right now.
Well, he did. He came from, he talked to us about his beginnings with his grandmother in Cuba, the struggles that he had. Poor. I mean, he really started from the bottom up, Janice, and he talked to us about that. He talked to us about not just, you know, his journey, but as he said, he brought so many people. There's so many people involved, so many young people. And when you get young people like that together, wasn't it young people, Janice, that actually helped bring Obama over the top?
Young people. Well, you know, whenever there's a major social movement, who's in the forefront? I mean, you know, you got your certain figures, but who helps really change the culture? It's the young people. Think about the civil rights movement. Think about SNCC. Think about the lunch counter desegregation. Who was sitting there getting, you know, pelted with salt and ketchup? And it was young people. So I'm really excited about this young man, and I want to know every single thing I can find out about him. I want to know also who raised this young man. Who was his mother? Who's his father? I want to know everything I can about him.
And that's because he impresses you.
Yes, very much so. I mean, when he talks, you get still and you think to yourself, this right here, this is the future. Mm-hmm. This is the future. You know, we've had our shot. And you know what? In Congress, largely, people have made a mess of it. Mm-hmm. So people for our generation need to kind of like step aside a little bit and let the next group come up and see what they can do. Because we couldn't do much with this mess.
Yeah, James. Now 25 years old. He talked
Hmm.
about Nancy Pelosi calling him, and others calling him to congratulate him. Um, how important is it that he remain? I mean, let me put it this way: do you think now he certainly has his own ideas and ideals and what he sees, what Generation Z sees. Um, how important it is for the younger ones like AOC and that crowd to embrace him and to get around him before the old guard gets him, because a lot of people are not too thrilled with the old guard.
Well, and they have a right not to be because they need to move aside. When I was talking to the producer of this show about this, the former congressional correspondent in me came into fruition. And the thing about it is, when you come to Congress, you kind of have to get in line in terms of assignments, in terms of office space, in terms of a lot of things. And when I think about the hurdles that this young man is going to have to overcome, is the fact that he is a freshman, and it looks increasingly he may be a freshman in the minority in the U.S. House of Representatives. So he's going to have to navigate those barriers. Now, the thing about Nancy Pelosi, and I know this from several people who know her, he's going to have to also fight paternalistic and maternalistic attitudes. Like,
Hmm.
oh, here, little boy, you just do this, and you be quiet and sit in the back bench, and we'll take care of things. Jim Clyburn, I didn't say that. So,
Oh wow,
he's going
he's
to have to
calling them
fight
out.
that. But he does have people like AOC who will be able to give him some guidance. And he has another big advantage. He's also going to be with the Congressional Black Caucus and the Congressional Hispanic Caucus too. So he'll be able to have allies with both of those. But his age is going to be a factor, but it won't be the factor in terms of where he goes, at least during his freshman term.
Well, let's listen to if we're ready. Let's listen to some of what he had to say to the Black press. Thank you for joining us, Maxwell Frost. Look, tell us first about your journey, which I know begins in Cuba with your grandmother.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, my grandmother, my mother, my aunt, they came here from Cuba in the late 1960s in what was called the Freedom Flights. And for folks who don't know, the Freedom Flights were where you put your name, and when you'd get chosen, you'd get a call. Your bank accounts would be frozen. You'd have 24 hours to pack one suitcase, and you would have to meet at the airport and go to America. And that's how my mom got here. But I was adopted at birth by my mom and my father, who taught me about vulnerability and taught me about music and love and culture. And the combination of them is what created me and gave me what I need to live my life and run this campaign. I got involved in politics 10 years ago because of the Sandy Hook shooting. And ever since then, I've been working to build the world that I believe we deserve. Just by virtue of being human. And so, really excited to be here. I feel super blessed and grateful to have won this campaign with the support of my community. And now it's on to the general election and then the hard part of governing, ensuring that we're providing for everybody and fighting for justice every day in the halls of Congress.
Wow. Well, a good amount of Florida voters believe you are ready for the challenge of U.S. Congress, filling the seat of Val Demings, which, of course, is no small shoes to fill. Why do you believe you are ready for this?
I believe I'm ready for this because of my experience and the work I've been doing. Being one of the youngest people to work at the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, I fought on the front lines of the ACLU's fight for Amendment 4 here in Florida, the ballot referendum to get voting rights to over 1.6 million people with previous felonies. Went to go work at the National ACLU, where I was able to help impact the president's agenda on abortion rights. And then became the national organizing director of March for Our Lives, the movement that came after the shooting that happened in Parkland, where I worked to push federal and state and local legislation to end gun violence in this country. Look, I'm not a politician. I'm not a millionaire. I'm not a lawyer. I'm an organizer. I've been arrested for this work. I've been tear gassed for this work. I've put myself on the line and believe that we need a government that looks like the country. And yes, that means in race. It also means in experience. And yes, it means in experience, but it also means in age. And we currently don't have a Congress that looks like the country. And so, look, I'm a small piece of such a big puzzle. I'm not no savior. I'm not, it's not I'm not the person who's going to change everything by myself. I come from the movement world and know that we have to all work together. And like I said, being a small piece of this puzzle is the honor of a lifetime. I hope my community will elect me to represent them in November, and we can get some good work done.
Are you hoping too that your entry into politics, and certainly you have a great shot at winning that House seat that Representative Demings is vacating? But do you see this as an opportunity to open doors for other Generation Z individuals? Because we do tend to have older people in government.
I do see it as a great opportunity. And what I always say, what I've been saying is this isn't just about Generation Z, it's about a new generation of candidates. And in my head, this generation isn't just young people, it is young people, but it's older folks too. This is a movement about working class families, poor and working class people who oftentimes don't feel represented in the halls of Congress. Look, I ran in a race with 10 people. And a lot of folks, a lot of times, will complain about these crowded races. I actually thought it was super cool in my race that we had a teacher running, we had a reverend running, we had a dietitian running, we had business owners running. We had people who don't come from this typical caricature of what it looks like to be a candidate for Congress, who said, you know what, screw it. I'm a teacher and I'm going to run to represent my community. And even though I won this race and we were competing against each other for this nomination, that gives me hope. And I want to see a country where we have more teachers, more nurses, more people just running for Congress because they know that they can represent their community. It's not just about Congress. It's about, city councils, county commissions. We need more working class people running for office. So I do believe and hope that this will serve as an inspiration to, yes, young people, but also anybody that, step up if you feel like you can and you want to. Please run to represent your community. We need the urgency you will bring to these issues because you know what it's like for people right now. And that's what we need in office.
Max, again, we want to stick with age for 1 second. 25 years old, Generation Z. You're running for national office. This is your first foray into politics. Are you finding pushback because of your age?
Yeah, not really. I think you'd think I'd get more of it. I think a lot of the pushback I got, as far as my age was concerned, was just the implicit, subconscious bias towards, me being a young person. Very rarely would someone come up to me in the campaign trail and be like, "You're too young. I don't like that." It was the subconscious things. It was my lack of availability of resources. It was my inability to tap into certain networks. It's kind of like when we think about the white supremacy in this country. It's less and less as someone comes up to you and says something outwardly racist. But it's the little things we notice in our systems, in our laws, and in the way people interact with us, where we see that racism come and manifest itself. It's the same thing on the ageist side of things. It was more of these implicit barriers and roadblocks that we had to overcompensate for and work around. And so, I'm blessed that we had the resources and ability to do that, build our own way of fundraising. We out fundraised everybody in this race, build our own way of running a field program where they only can't. I'm in my office right now. It's empty because everyone's taking a break. But we're the only campaign that was really knocking doors in a real way, knocked tens of thousands of doors. We made tens and thousands of phone calls. We had to really kind of make our own book on how to run this race because things were just so different. But I always bring up this story. I was talking with voters a few months ago, and a lady came up to me and answered the door, and she was an older lady. She said, "Boy, how old do you have to be to run for Congress? You look too young." And I said, "Ma'am, it says 25 years old in the Constitution." And she looked at me, she smiled, and she said, "Well, it sounds like you're just on time." And that's my message to people. Sometimes we might feel like we're early. Sometimes we might feel like we're too late. And I think the answer is always, we're just on time.
Just on time. So when you look at the political landscape, particularly at the national level, and of course you're running on the national level for Congress, and you see the divisiveness, the unwillingness for any real bipartisan work, after measuring all of that, what can a young person like yourself bring to the table that could at least attempt to bring some decorum back to politics?
Well, I think a lot of it, there's a lot, that goes into that. Some of it being just my presence and my understanding of the urgency of these issues. For me, as someone who's coming right out of the movement, someone who just 2 years ago was arrested in the city for a nonviolent protest advocating for Black lives, to now, being the Democratic nominee for Congress in that same city. I think I just bring a certain scope of the issues that I hope will help both Democrats and Republicans alike really bake into the urgency of these issues, especially as it relates to working class families across the district. And what I always say is, look, I have a platform that I believe in. I call it a love letter to my community, because we had just looked around and saw the problems and said, here's the bold transformational change we deserve. I know we're not going to get it tomorrow. I know we're not going to get a lot of it this year. But what I believe in is never coming to the table already at the compromise, being steadfast in our values, knowing that we will have to compromise at points and work with people across the aisle to get to where we need to go, but never losing sight of the world that we believe in. When I close my eyes and I think about the world I want to live in and the world I want my kids to live in, it's a world where we have healthcare, where you don't have to fear gun violence, where people have the ability and the resources to just live their best lives. And that's it. And I know it's kind of oversimplified, but I think simplifying it is important for people, because at the end of the day, if we can agree on that, it's not blue, it's not red, it's not left, it's not right. It's the people versus the problem. And that's the way we're going to be able to work together.
Janice, I see you're saying you were impressed. David Youngblood says, I'm encouraged by him saying he's not the savior and we should not fall victim to believing so. Thanks, Tracy Woods. He says he likes the questions there. David Child says, great show. But Janice, you were impressed.
Very, very much so by this young man. And also, I'm thinking about all the other young people who will see him and hopefully be inspired to get off the sidelines and get involved, and to also run for public office.
Yeah, James.
We've done what we could with it, and it's time for a new generation to step out there.
Yes.
And James, you heard him say, how active he is in the community. He's an activist as well. He was arrested for with the Black Lives Matter movement and protesting for Black lives. What impressed you, James, about Maxwell Frost?
He's not a political hack. I mean, there's a time and a place, Stacey and Janice, for people who intern for senators and representatives who spend time in Tallahassee studying political science and public policy. And there's a place for people who basically worked under a senator and then decided to run for Congress based on that senator's experience with that senator. But I like the fact that this is a man of the community. This is a man that has worked in the community for various causes. I really like the fact that he worked to make sure that felons will be able to get their full voting rights restored in Florida, because as you all both of you all know, many of those felons are black males. And so that is a very positive, but I really like the fact that he's not anybody's pet. He is his own man.
Yeah, Cheryl Smith is writing in from the Texas Metro News, the publisher of the Texas Metro News. She says she likes what she's hearing. Unlike so many, he is not being divisive or blaming. She also says he has done the work and is different from those who step up and haven't done any work. Janice, maybe you can speak to that. How important is that aspect of it?
When he was talking about his community organizing, I couldn't help but think about a really famous other organizer that ran for office, and that's the former President Barack Obama. I was very impressed by that. He's not just running because of his family name or because he went to Harvard Law School or something. He's also done the work. He's done the work. He's a man of the people. And hopefully, once he's in Washington, he'll remain a man of the people. Yes. and work for the people. So that's what I was thinking while he was talking.
Yeah, his his upbringing wasn't that great, but he's an example.
Yes, it was. Not maybe in terms of finances.
Right.
But he got the good stuff.
That's where I was going. There you go.
Sorry for cutting you off.
No, because that's where I was going. You're 100% right, Janice. This is why Janice is such a great columnist at the Philadelphia Inquirer. She's been that for, I'm not going to say a long time because James said Denise is 30 years old, and I'm going to stick with that right there. Okay, she said 30-ish. We're going to stick with that right there. But so let's just briefly. I know we're a little over time, but James and Janice, let's talk about. We raised a question about the old guard and what type of influence they may have. Now we heard what he had to say. Now, James, break it down a little bit. Are we still concerned after listening to him? Is there any concern that he's going to be heavily influenced by the so-called old guard?
Oh, of course. They're going to definitely try to pull him over to the side and tell him how to vote and what to say and what to do. They're going to do that because that's Capitol Hill, and that's how Capitol Hill operates. And they're going to also try to convince him to do things that he probably should not do. Maxwell needs to stay in the House of Representatives, maybe for about 10 or 15 years. He should not be looking to run for Senate. He should not be looking to become something else. He should stay in the House of Representatives. He should learn how that institution works. He should work up to seniority to become a subcommittee chair and a chair, because he will have real power in terms of being a chair. If he does what Jesse Jackson Jr. did and try to run for U.S. Senate when Jesse Jackson Jr. was in a perfect position to help build that third airport in Chicago, he will get in trouble. And I like what AOC did not do. She did not primary Chuck Schumer this year in terms of running for the Senate. I hope those old bulls leave him alone and let him gain seniority, let him gain knowledge of the institution, so he will be very effective for his constituents.
Well, we see a little bit of his personality. He certainly was really resolute in what he was saying. Janice poured out his history and how that upbringing is so important. Again, I guess a part of that point too is that it's not about how much money you have or how much money you don't have. It's about the values and principles, right, Janice, that the parents instill. This guy's a hard worker, obviously.
Yes. And one more thing. I don't think the old guard is going to leave him alone. You know, they're looking for new voices, new leadership. They need people. I think they're going to try to move him along very quickly. I wouldn't be surprised if within 5 years, if he's not the head of the Democratic Party, or they're not talking about him for a much higher office. And my only hope is that they don't move him along too quickly. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's hard to say when that moment is, but there comes a time in a window when you have an opportunity to step into greatness and into your destiny. You can do it too soon, or you can wait too late. And the trick is kind of knowing when that moment is. Like Barack Obama knew it when his moment was. A lot of people were like, no, it's not your time. But it was.
It was.
So I hope that when he gets to Congress, that that the old guard, which they'll have their hands out waiting for him, will wait and not push him too far ahead before he's ready.
So Janice doesn't see them suppressing him. She actually sees them using him and being able to move him along. So James, that sounds like a good thing, right?
It is a good thing, but I really want to harp on what she just said. The fact is that he needs to gain knowledge of how Washington works. He needs to gain knowledge of how Capitol Hill works. Then he will be more effective should he choose to run for senator or governor. Janice made an excellent point about pushing these people when they're not ready for these positions, and then they just flame out. And so that's really, he's got to be careful with that. He may have to get into some confrontations with some of these old bulls in terms of that, but they should guide him along and they should do it right.
He seems like a fast learner, though, right? I mean, he comes across as somebody who learns real quick.
And I hope he remembers he's gotten this far by doing it his way. Now, when he gets to Washington, there's going to be people, come, let me talk to you. Let me show you how this is done. And he's got to remember, do it your way. That they did it their way, and everything's different now. It's a whole new game.
Yeah.
I think he will.
he did tell us that he will be in Washington next month. Well, speaking of being in Washington, for the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation's annual legislative caucus conference. He's looking forward to really getting his hands dirty, as it were, doing the work. You can't say hands dirty with politics, right? Because
I did cringe a little bit when you said
saw
dirty.
I saw that. So he's looking to get calluses on his hand. I don't know how to say it. He's just looking to do some hard work. That's okay. Janice was like, okay. Look, enough of that. But David Youngblood says he should learn as much as possible and bring home tangible benefits to his constituency. He should not try to establish national, I can't make that out, David, but at the expense of his district. And Cheryl Smith says it's a combination. He has to know history. Impressive young man, to say the least. Maxwell Frost, he certainly appears to be the next U.S. congressman from that district in Florida. Brand is what it's not to try to establish a national brand. I should have guessed that, right, David? But January, it would be more than a shocker if he's not sworn in as the next congressman out of the 10th district in Florida. So we'll be watching. He said he'll be back with us at the Black Press. Certainly, I know that he'll make his mark one way or another. This kid has, and we say kid because 25 to me and James, that's a kid.
Me too.
He's gonna make his mark one way or the other. This guy is impressive, to say the least. We asked him several questions, and the answers were there. He was very versed in things that he needed to be versed in, but importantly, he's done the work on at the ground level. He has seemingly has a really good team around him, and that's important, right? Having a good team around you. How that's underestimated at times. But just briefly before we go, I'll give you both a chance to talk about that. Having the right team.
It's important to have the right team. And here's the scary part. You got to still stay true to who you are. You get too many people in your ear. No, don't put out that tweet that way. Don't say this that way. Say it this way. You got to take some of that in and then know I'm going to be who I am. I mean, I've gotten this far being me and not change. That I hope he'll be strong with, because he's on the right path. But it's really hard when you get too many people coming at you, pulling you in different directions, giving you too much advice. Sometimes you got to just block it all out and step up there in your moment, kind of like Serena Williams has done. She did it her way with almost no real role models other than her sister.
Mm.
And she was uniquely herself.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And you mentioned the tweets and stuff. Yesterday we talked a lot about how the White House threw some serious Twitter shade at some people. But James, go ahead. She said, "I love it. It was amazing."
Rightly so.
But rightly so. But James, go ahead. Your final assessment there.
Well, let me just say, harp on what Janice's saying. It's important that he gets, when he comes to Washington, that he hires people who know Capitol Hill and who know him, and will be able to balance that so he can be an effective legislator for his constituents. It's the staff that makes you an effective legislator. You can be as wonderful as you want to be in terms of a person, but if you have crappy staff, you're going to be a crappy member of Congress.
Wow. Well, you heard it from James Wright. No, Maxwell Frost. We'll have more on the Let It Be Known YouTube page. Check it out there. Please subscribe. Please share the program, and hit like too. Like and share. But check it out on our YouTube page, Let It Be Known News. Thanks for joining us at Let It Be Known, and we will see you tomorrow.